In today's video I'm going to be scrapping this old, what was a Sharp 381 VC381 VCR from about 1983. I've already removed the covers off this one and I think they long ago went to the tip. But this one basically was recovered from an old abandoned house and there's quite a bit of rust and stains. Some of that is leaky roof, some of it is probably the local possums which the roof was infested with. And it's well and truly had its day. I can see that little spring was a common thing to find in these. That's from a broken gear here on the end of the loading mech. Oh, it's just down in there. It's that one there. One of those anyway. And I might as well scrap this thing. I want to do a video on. Oh, that's seized up. I think just about. I want to do a video on how hi-fi stereo works in VCRs, so I thought I'd pinch a set of heads out of something, and this is about all I've got. And I've been meaning to get rid of this thing for a while now anyway, and that drum barely even turns. But there is a little bit of scrap metal in these, and back in the day when these were still a thing, I'd normally keep a few of these around for parts. And I always buy second-hand ones, so you'd sort of get a stack of 10 of these or something, either these or, you know, there was different versions. The VC386, I think the VC9300 was very similar to these, and there was a couple other models with slightly different features. So they're quite a common machine and handy to have for parts, especially when you're buying second-hand ones. Often people had broken things in them and stuff, and they'd eventually get fairly disassembled, and then you'd probably remove a few bits for scrap metal if you could be bothered. And I used to toss most of it into a bin, and a guy would actually take a lot of it away rather than having to go to the dump, because it wasn't really worth anything back in those days. Sometimes you could even chuck some of these whole mechanisms, especially the Panasonic ones that were aluminium, just a few screws and the whole lot comes out, cut a few wires or pull the connectors and you could just throw them in the irony alley bin. Things like the transformer's pretty easy to get out of these. There's some aluminium on the power supply there, and the drum assembly. There's also a great big capstan in these, probably zinc, but you'd normally throw it in with the irony alley. I never used to bother with the motors and stuff. A lot of the steel stuff, if it was sort of already loose because I'd been pulling bits off it or whatever, I'd just throw it in a separate pile and that'd go to the scrapyard, even though it wasn't really worth anything. But we'd get rid of it to the proper place. But back when I was last sort of doing this as a business, you'd just end up with vanfuls of this stuff. Otherwise it would just go straight to the dump because there was no e-waste or anything. And these days there's not really much worth keeping out of these, and particularly when they're in this condition. Bottom board survived reasonably well. I don't know, might be something worth saving out of it, but I am tempted to probably just throw this in the e-waste pile. That's right, we've got a real motor under here. A great big capstan made out of zinc, I think it is. Definitely something that's not steel. That's the bottom of the drum. I think that should come out if we just pull that plug from above. There's a real motor and another little motor there, which these days is September 1983 by the look of it, 27th of September, which these days are probably worth something for scrap. Those I think have got coils in them. They're a brake unit. They just pull something together, I think, to break the reels. You know, I never worried about chips or anything like that back in the day. I knew people that did actually recover gold, but back then there was like mainframe computers and stuff around, and all the edge connectors on cards and computers. Lots of things with actual real gold in them that were worth doing. You really wouldn't bother with any of this sort of stuff. Some of these parts, maybe, I wonder if they're worth keeping these days. It's probably, I think that's a motor driver chip or something down in there. What is it, an STA471 or something? I don't think I've ever had to touch one of those. The electronics in these are super reliable. A couple of IR ICs, might be some 4000 series or something like that. There's a TC, which would be Toshiba made, yeah, 4081. So there's a few logic chips I think in these, 4081 again. An Hitachi version 4538 or something, 4013, what were they? I don't remember the number, but some Sharp branded chips. That's a microprocessor, useless in anything else. some of these Sharp chips, there used to be lists around of what they were actually equivalent to. Some of their chips in the TVs were just an NEC UPC or something, rebadged with a Sharp IX number on it. It's actually an IR. Great big pile of trim pots in the corner there. Not really worth the bother. There's a few switches, but they're pretty much specific to these sort of machines. Don't think I ever even had one of those broken ever. They were pretty solidly built, these things, so besides the belt kit, not a lot used to go wrong besides, yeah, that gear that used to break. I think some of the gears that ran the tape guides up broke. The one on the end of this mech was quite common for breaking. I think the switches occasionally went on these. Occasionally heads worn out and stuff with a lot of use. And yeah, I guess there's a bit of wire in here. If these days it might be worth salvaging. I never would have bothered in the past, but we should be able to actually unplug most of these boards at one end or the other. So it's got an earth wire, I think that's one of them. That goes to our drum assembly. So you could just cut that off, I guess, but I think there are actual plugs in here. Might as well do the transformer wire at it. And these screws are even worth keeping. I used to have tons of screws, but I threw most of them out or gave them to my neighbour. So I probably should keep a few more these days. And the drum is as simple as 3 screws. We may have to take the cassette housing out to get it. I think I can just reach it. Let's see, we might take the cassette housing out anyway. Only 4 red screws on the sides. Everyone used to, who didn't know how to fix these things, customers and stuff, always took these top screws out, but they don't actually get the mech out. They just pull the top plate off it and make a bit of a mess of it. So there's 4 down the side and 2 on this little plastic bit under the, behind the flap. Front cover is just, I think, 3 screws along the top and 3 along the bottom, which also takes off the bottom cover. And it's as simple as get that out, pull that off. I guess you could save that motor. There's a piece of aluminium there that I think you just basically bend that out. That can go in the scrap metal. That little plastic piece comes out. Rubbish bin. This can go in the scrap steel, I think. Like I say, it might be worth pinching a couple of these screws and bits and pieces. We can take that whole motor assembly off quite easily. There's circlips and bits and pieces in these, but I've got a million of those. You can buy a kit of circlips off eBay or somewhere these days for next to nothing. They used to be well worth keeping. One thing I do want to look for is any little plastic clips, because you cannot get those anymore. You used to be able to buy a kit of plastic kits for cassette players and video recorders. That belt's not too bad considering, but that better go in the rubbish, I think. Could be worth keeping that little motor. October 83. That's the gear that's broken, that's moving there. Used to have a spring wound around it and a little post there. That rusty old spring I threw away. Not really much else. Little leaf switch, circuit board, few wires, maybe a couple more screws that I'll save for myself. I can do that after anyway. I'll get the battery drill in and salvage a few of those. And that should be the last screw for the drum. We should be able to just pull that out. So normally that you just toss it in the irony alley bin. In this case I might pinch the upper drum off it, like I say, for a bit of video use, and the rest of that can go in the rubbish basically. But you really need a head extractor to get that off. That's just a little static strap. Don't think you even technically have to take these off if you're just ripping it off, but there's a little aluminium piece again that can be recycled. 2 screws there, and normally because you're going to replace a head or whatever or reuse it, you just unsolder those 4 wires. But you'll generally find that won't just come off. Sometimes they do. Sometimes heating these up, because it's brass and aluminium, will be enough. You can just wobble them off. Normally you get a head removal tool that goes in those 2 threaded holes and pushes against that and lifts it up. There is a bit of copper wire down in there. I guess we could even have a look how that's set up. A couple of little small Allen keys there to take out. So yeah, a couple of little hex head things. Hopefully one of these still fits it. I did buy a new set of these, but God knows where it is. Might be that size. They're pretty small. Yeah, that's the one. So if you collect grub screws or something, there's a couple of them there. And they should have be a magnet assembly. Just a ferrite type magnet on a bit of steel. It's got a bit of aluminium, so I guess I can go in the irony. Normally you wouldn't treat heads like this because you'll reckon treating them like this. I think it's the ones with the lacquer on, the screws we take off to get the motor off. They're actually pretty loose on this one. In fact, it'll probably be those ones that aren't the ones you take off, of course. I can never remember. So we've disassembled the magnet assembly on the motor a bit, not that it'll go anywhere much. That's the one that gets the motor off. So if you wanted a bit of, I don't know, what is that, just motor scrap metal, isn't it? You could separate that off. I don't think it's really worth the bother, but someone might. And you can undo a couple more bits here and the whole inner shaft will come out, and there's a couple of bearings. Those bearings might even be worth saving these days. Get rid of that. There's a pinch roll. I think that's actually brass or aluminium usually on those. I don't know if anyone takes that for scrap metal. Now there's the sort of thing I want, that little plastic washer in there. They're probably the most valuable thing in these things these days because you can't seem to buy them anymore. There's a other plastic washer under it. One's a split one. Don't know what that remains of, but I'm going to put them in there where they're safe. To me, that's probably the most valuable stuff. Those little rollers, I think that's a reasonably thick bit of aluminium. So I guess that could go in the aluminium. Not really worth anything. Another thing I did want is the audio control head. Now normally you'd keep the wiring attached to that if you're going to swap it into another machine or something, but I'm not. But that might be handy in my video as well. Now I've got the capstan motor here. These have a belt driven big pulley. I guess we can snip some of that off of there. Get that out of my way. Couple more useful screws. I don't think these motors are much good for anything. I've got two connections, one to run the DC end of the motor. I think that's a sensor on the back of it. And 14th of October 83, 7 volts DC. That's a bit random. Yeah, they're always a pain to clean, those brass pulleys on these when you do the belt kit. So I've pinched out, that's just a normal circlip. They've just got normal circlip. They've probably got a couple of, I guess we could pinch the tension band out of it, and we've probably got a couple of other plastic washers, not the split ones, but oops, wrecked the spring on these reels, I think. Get rid of that. Might keep that band, although in the Sharp it's probably not the best. Something's eating it. There's a bit of copper there if you really want to bother, but that can go in the rubbish, I think. Yeah, there's what I was thinking of. There's a little sprung washer, but there's a little plastic washer there. They're handy to have as well. I think, yeah, there's another one. Oh, there's a bit of bronze or something if you really want it going right through the middle of that. But that can go in the rubbish, I think. Yeah, that's what there's a little pair of those little washers. I think they used them to space the height of these things correctly. Let's have a look at this, because I don't know if I've ever even bothered to pull one of these apart. They never played up in these things that I can remember. But there's a little clutch assembly here, another plastic washer. It sounded a bit metal actually. So what on earth have we got there? Some weird, well that's our clutch plate with felt on it. Here's the plastic bit. Oh, it's actually a double-sided thing. I don't really want any more springs. I've got a million little springs, but they could be handy to keep. So So that's basically the top side of that little clutch unit. Out you come. I'll nick that other washer. Don't think I can bother keeping the circlip. And I think I just spotted another one on that little hall sensor thing for the belt, for the counter belt. That can all go in the rubbish. There's another, is that plastic? Yeah. Because they're the sort of things that get easily lost, so it's always nice to have a few lying around. Don't think the idler unit has anything useful. Wire up here, always good to take these two screws out, whether you're doing a belt kit or scrapping the thing, because that's your real motor under there. Take that little piece off. Remove the spring. Normally you'd put that back, but I'm not going to keep it. And then when that drops out, this idler unit comes out, or it's already coming out. It's been sitting against the motor for quite a while. Look at that dead spot there. It's got a dent in it and it's gone shiny. These are a nice easy one to do. Change the tyre. These occasionally would play up, but very rarely, because there's a bit of a clutch in there and stuff. Don't think I'll bother keeping that. There's our sensor lamp. Common problem with these. Used to buy this little lamp separate because it was a lot cheaper, and just push the wires back through and pull it out and put it back in the same plastic mount. And I think this is just about demolished really, but we will throw this steel bit in the scrap. I think I've got to take a load of old fencing and stuff to the scrapyard, so I might as well get rid of all this in the process. What do we got there? That's not going to go to that. Looks like we've got a connector to the erase head. I wonder if I can just take this whole thing out now. I might say these big screws are also handy to keep. Oh, I was going to pinch the plastic split washer off this whole sensor. But yeah, you used to get so many hundreds of these screws out of things, you just threw them all over the floor half the time in the shed when you're pulling parts out of these things, and swept them up and threw them away. There's just too many to deal with. And that's that. Oh, let's finish this mech off. And that's the real motor that I undid from above. Probably still not in bad condition, that one. Might be worth keeping these days. JLA 2BA5, and that doesn't tell us much. That looks like a Matsushita part. So that's the load motor. I think you just undo a couple of screws and you've got that whole assembly. Again, not something you normally touch in these machines, but get a feeling I may have worked on them, because these master cams can chew out. Might as well get this big heavy capstan out of here. That just swings. So I don't think we even need to remove that, but I might pinch the screws. It should pull out. It's a bit dirty on the upper side. So that's a nice lump of irony alley. This one looks a bit, I don't know if it's bubbling or whether it was made like that. Don't think it's that corroded. Oh, there's a, I guess while we're at it, might as well get this ring. This is like a, oh, it does not want to come out. Bunch of copper wire in there. I think it's many turns of very finely done copper wire. Sometimes just use the side cutters if there's a stubborn screw. If I can get it to bite. God, that thing is stubborn as. It's turning, but very reluctantly. I guess the other option is, if that's not going to come, I'm just going to break that off, since I don't want it for anything. It'd be interesting to have a look inside that actually. I get a feeling I pulled one apart once just out of curiosity, and it's packed with very fine coil of wire, I think. So it'd be a good sensor for something, I guess. Can actually break this plastic by the look at it, so you could probably get that out of there if you really wanted to, but I think that's super fine. Yeah, look at it. just got a bunch of plastic or something on the front of it. Come on. Not really worth the bother for scrap metal, but get rid of those bits of wire. I guess the easiest way would be to cut right through it, and then that should all peel out of there. Look at that for a coil wire. God, what a mess. Probably not such a good idea to cut it, but if you just want it for scrap metal, that's what you used to do. Chop things up like that, get rid of all the foreign matter, because then you've got your, I think it's the same as burnt copper wire, this stuff, lacquered wire, I forget what they call it all now, but I always used to toss this in with this, any burnt wire. I guess that piece I just threw in the bin. That's what it's still called, PVC coated wire, I guess. That can go in the normal wire recycling. And there's a tiny little ball worth all of 5 cents if you're lucky, which wouldn't have been worth anything once, but now it is. I don't want to bother with any of that. I guess you could take this, I might nick it for the screws. Be a lot quicker with a battery drill, which is what I probably should be doing, but, and I guess you could take these two pieces as well if you wanted to. So that's a bearing, it's a bit of bronze, so a lot of that I just used to throw in the irony alley, anything like that. Usually it was only came out if I had to pull it out for some other reason, and getting parts to fix something, I wouldn't have bothered stripping it down, because you used to get like 25 cents a kilo for irony alley or something, so it wasn't really, it's the sort of thing, if you had it as a byproduct of what you're doing, or if it was easily removed from something, it was worth selling. But if you actually had to pull these sort of things apart, you wouldn't bother, because you wouldn't make any money out of the time you're wasting on it. But we might as well strip this thing down properly and see what we got. And these are the brakes, and I get a feeling these have a reasonable amount of copper wire in them as well, but again, I only would have ever pulled these apart for the hell of it. I don't think they ever failed that I can remember, beyond maybe needing a lubrication. I assume we take those bits, looks like they just bend them over, but I was like most people, I was always curious to see what things were made out of, because that's how you learn it. There's a shaft, so this bit is, oh I see, we've got two, how does that come out then? It does just push up. Yeah, that's, yeah, God, it is a substantial coil of wire. It's like a relay or something, or solenoid. But that is copper wire now, I can see it. Can I get this tape? Amazingly, often still peels off even after all these years. It does tear, but if you can get it, the whole face of it going. Missed one bit. Come on. Yeah, it's like a big band-aidy sort of thing. Almost like gaffer tape, but something a bit different, I think. Japanese like using this stuff. So there you have it. If you needed, if you could measure the size of it, you could probably use it to wind something else rather than buying wire to wind things. But again, you could sort of snap those couple of probably steel terminals or something off there. You can even, this is the sort of thing you could do if you really could be bothered. You again normally wouldn't have bothered with a little coil like this, but you could do that, and then you just, I seem to remember Philips TVs or something, you could just, I think you just break them off and just pull on them, and bingo, more copper. Because these sort of parts are completely useless even today. No one's ever going to need one, I wouldn't think. And I guess we could put that in the PVC, or if we broke a bit more off. And this was a hassle, they're pretty fiddly to do. But you could save these things if you wanted to. I certainly dismantled a few TV yokes over the years. If you could do it in front of the TV or something. just on the side sort of thing. It'd be too boring to sit there and do it thinking about what you're doing, but do it in the background. It wasn't too bad to strip a few of them down. Even had a couple of dollars a kilo for scrap for the burnt copper, but that as it is can just go into motors, I guess. And there's quite a few nice screws there I might nick. Let's get that out of the way. I guess I should leave it on there for scrap metal reasons, but a lot of that small stuff I think I'll just chuck it out. It's not really worth messing around with. We could save a bit of this wiring. That went to a switch. Still got a mode switch here. What's this little thing? I'm not even sure what that is from here. Oh, that's the hall sensor, I think, for the... Yeah, that's our hall sensor for the counter. Oh, I was going to nick that thing off that. So there's a little transistor thing here. Can I get that out of there? You should be able to prise it up, but it's a risk of breaking it. Just like a little 3-pin device there. Service menu will probably tell you more about it. Don't think I ever had a call for using something like that. And I guess we could save all that wiring. That unplugs. Because I mean, this is almost worth enough money to bother saving these days, but back in the day you wouldn't have bothered. What was it, 25 cents a kilo I think I used to get for PVC copper wire. So again, it's not something you'd chase if there was any labour involved, but if you ended up with it by default, and you know, cutting the power cords off things and that was for safety reasons when you chucked them out anyway, so you didn't trip over them. But there's another plastic washer. Don't think that one's actually split. That's a magnet assembly on that. The belt runs in that pulley, but that's actually ferrite magnets or thing. So that's what ran that hall sensor. And we have another little plastic washer there, I think a little pinch. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Like I say, you could recycle that. That's probably brass. Guess we could have a quick look at it, but that should be an old... The older ones are all brass bearings in these things. Still hard to tell. Well, of course it's going on a magnetic tape, so it can't be magnetic. I think I think it might actually be a stainless steel. There is a bearing in there, so it's not really worth bother. That one's all split, so it's no good as a pinch roller anymore. That brake is all gooed up. They're the sort of things that were sometimes worth saving, but tape guides you never really use. You could take them out as well because they're brass, stainless and zinc, I would say. So like I say, if you really want to save every last piece and your time doesn't matter too much, you can always salvage stuff like that. And the rest of this is probably copper wire in the head as well, I guess, but I doubt it's enough for anyone to want it. There's a mode switch. I guess it could be interesting to have a look inside of one of those, or maybe even keep it as parts. Again, these, I don't think they've really played up on these machines, so that's a big lump of scrap. That can go with the cassette housing. I might even screw the cassette housing back onto it once I've pinched a few good screws. Now I've got to score another plastic washer off something, and that can all go in the scrap heap. Oh, these are stuck together. You've got to get a knife and cut the top off these to open them up. So I don't think I'll worry about that. Might even keep that. So that's the mechanism. A bit of copper. And you could pull this other one apart if you really could be bothered. And being an old machine, we've got that. We've got those motors, and those motors. Obviously, for scrap metal purposes, you'd probably undo the other two screws. I don't know if these gear assemblies are worth keeping at all now. They probably really aren't, because I'm not going to be fixing a ton of these machines. So we should really take the motors off, get that power cord off it, and I think these are just to squeeze them or cut them. I should just go through, and that's that board out of there. I guess we should recycle the wiring just to get it out of the way if nothing else. and it might even be worth keeping this board these days. Don't think there's much of any real value, and it's all grotty on the other side. Maybe that should just go in the e-waste, I think. Occasionally handy just for some random part you want. And let me think with this. Does that one? I don't think that's it. That was it. There's normally a screw there which is gone, and a screw there, and one more here which is completely rusted, and two for the power supply here. And these power supplies in this model were super reliable. I think the VC386, I think it was a stereo one, used to get dots all over the screen because of caps in that power supply. I remember doing a lot of those. Every second-hand one you bought had faulty capacitors in it, which is probably why someone got rid of it, because it had a grainy looking picture on playback, I think it was. That does not want to come. I had to pick a nice rusty one, didn't I? Yuck. This has got this. I'll just cut that wire there because that's just the. Oh, there's another one going into the transformer. That's right. Let's pull that plug, and that can just go in the rubbish as is, I think, or should really go in the scrap metal, but we'll see what happens with that. The transformer's rusted as well. So this one's definitely not a good example of one worth doing. That is coming. That is super rusty. The other one though, I'm not sure it's going to go. And the other side doesn't show any signs of. No, we may have to break the. If I can get two of them out, I can break the bracket off the transformer. I think I have to hit that off with a hammer. And this is the power supply. I remember pulling quite a few of these, like I say, mainly to repair them. But I think these I often used to just grab them if the machine was already in pieces. Often you take that back bracket apart, getting things out. Or it was only a few, like I say, with a battery drill you could soon undo a few screws and pop that. And this thing, you could either throw it straight in the iron alley bin, or you take another 4 screws out. Yeah, it's just well and truly stuck to the. I'll keep those screws. And you've got a bit of extruded, and take that off, and you've got a bit more extruded, and a reasonable piece of it at that. What was in this again? It's a little switch mode type power supply. There's a few decent sized transistors in it. Oh, they're just diodes. That's the output of the switch mode, no doubt. Looks like a bridge rectifier. 4725 volt. So it's basically got a transformer, drops it down to a fairly low voltage, and this I think drops it down to like your 5 volts and everything, and probably 12 volts and God knows what. But I think in the 386 it was these caps in here used to cause issues on the screen. Normally just blanket change them. And we've got this board just clips out. These are a nice simple one to change. If you had like dodgy tuning assembly or something. But now that's basically just e-waste. We've got a tuner board. That just comes off. They can sometimes be handy for something, including if you're building like a pattern generator or something and you want to go from the modulator to the back socket or whatever. Just got a nice shielded little RCA to RCA. I've got a tuner. In this one, yeah, pretty rusty. Probably not worth the bother of doing anything with. We've got, what sort of chip is that? A Sharp IX something, or just got X0113. IF probably, little ceramic filter there. 5.5 I guess. For your sound, or blocking your sound, one or the other. There's another one. Very rare you need them, but occasionally they use them in electronic kits and stuff. There's probably a SAW filter or something. SF1501 would probably give it away as a SAW filter. It's a pretty junky. Used to be useful when you occasionally got a faulty tuner board or something, one of these. There's one screw on this one. I was thinking this was another pop out. Screws worth keeping, that's for sure. I think everything just unplugs in these things. They were built for being serviced. I think that's a I'm going to say record bias oscillator, and that's what it is. So this is probably went to the record head, I assume. A 4066, which I think is a quad bilateral switch or something. Just a CMOS chip. They were quite commonly used, so sometimes you could pinch these sort of things out of these and use them in a kit you were building or something to save buying one from Dick Smith, which I think I've done on occasion back when they used to cost a decent amount of money. And I think this just pulls out now. I haven't taken the front off yet, of course, but we're getting there now. I guess I should have, that board's not even worth unscrewing other than if you want the screw. Yeah, these tuner boards, display boards, were a bit of a pain to change. I think occasionally the displays went dim and stuff on them, and you had to pull it, all this wiring that went up through these other boards. Some of it goes up to those other boards, some of it goes to the main board. I remember doing the odd one and they were a bit of a job to change. Of course we don't care about it this time, so we can just snip that off. And again, yeah, nothing really worth saving there, I don't think. Some nice little clear red LEDs, if you had a use for those. And that should all just come out now, I think. No, we've got one more cable tie. No, we don't. Just caught. Looks like the wiring harness is actually joined to the main board. So most of that's actually connected by the look of it. And it's got these clip things as well. Not really that much worth the bother, but since we're scrapping this thing, let's see what's here. It's a real pain. Some of these wires just go back onto the board by the look of it, and that's all they are, I think. They're just looping from one bit to the other, which makes them difficult to get rid of. And that's it. I think these days a lot of them, if you want top dollar for it, you've got to cut all the connectors off, don't you? So really not worth the bother. Might as well save that one. I don't think I'll bother with those short ones. You've got another, oh, that was that chip I looked at before, I think. Yeah, I've taken the bracket off, so we looked at that board. Yeah, that's just pretty much e-waste, I think. Okay, so ultimate recycler style, we'll have a look at what we got out of this. I'm not going to bother weighing it, but that's all the scrap we got. That's, I guess, of any value. It'd probably be likely to be like 200 grams there of wire. Could be getting there. There's a little bit of, don't know what that'll weigh, not much of copper. Motors and transformers, I just ended up hitting that with a hammer, club hammer, and broke the other, or mount off one end and just peeled it out of its bracket, which is still attached to the base. So that's a decent weighted transformer there. It's got a solid one, and that bunch of motors, around a kilo maybe. We've got some extruded aluminium, not real heavy, but that probably weighs more than that. And a bit of die cast, one little tiny bit of clean aluminium. Most of that's only good because that's got a piece of stainless steel in it. Irony alley, I think all of that's dirty basically, maybe besides these two little pieces. And the door, which has a spring and stuff and a couple of metal bits stuck in, which not really worth removing. That's mostly dirty aluminium. Oh, and technically we've got our drum assembly. That's got a bit of weight in it, even with the motor removed. So that's another nice piece of irony aluminium. None of this is clean. You can take this upper drum off, but it's got two little heads in it. I think the main problem is there's two little adjuster screws down in there, grub screws, that make it not worth the bother. I think that piece there comes off if you take the little heater element thing off there. You can get one little tiny bit of aluminium. Let's have a quick look. I think that thing was to heat the drum up, because it's, so where did the juice switch go in this thing? There's usually a juice switch in them somewhere. This is not the juice switch, so I think it was attached to something else on the main part of it, the machine. So we'll take that off. My memory is that this bracket comes off. There it is. So one tiny, weighs absolutely nothing, so that's definitely aluminium. That can be recycled. This lower drum, even if you pull it all to bits, I get a feeling there's more, the bearings are stuck in it. I can take this. Does this bit ever come off clean? I can't remember. Oh, it's got a piece of stainless pin on the end there. Again, this is only something that occasionally when you had to repair one of these drums by swapping bits around or whatever, you'd end up with bits and pieces like this. Because especially doing up second-hand machines, there's almost nothing you didn't end up pulling apart at some stage to get a machine going again. Oh, we've got the circuit board, and then there's a bracket on it, and that's just, like I say, not worth the time to disassemble really. That weighs absolutely nothing, even with a steel bracket on it, which itself won't weigh much, but at least I'm getting some screws. I should be stocked up nicely with screws. And that's got that pin, which again probably could be knocked out. Oh, there's another pin there. So I think that counts as irony alley just because it's got a bit of stainless in it. And yeah, I don't think any of this can really be cleaned down. I think there's another coil of wire in there. And man, that is tight. So not very good, but I'll take that up a drum off. And the rest can go in the scrap metal. So that's what you get for a whole lot of work. And of course, I guess it counts as worth something these days. There's probably at least a good kilo of steel there, which down in Tassie here is not worth anything really. I think I'd, you know, what did I get for a pile of stuff I took out there? Absolutely $7.50 or something for a whole trailer full of stuff. A lot of it was just fencing wire and stuff, which didn't have much weight, but there was quite a bit of other junk in there. But it was all mixed up between car parts and stuff, so there was brake discs and whatever, heavy stuff, and a lot of light stuff, so it really wasn't worth much. But most of this, I think I'll pinch most of the screws out of this, and then just screw these two bits together with some crappy screws, and that can go in the next pile of steel to the scrapyard. It's just cheaper to take it to the scrapyard than throw it on the tip basically. And yeah, at least it gets recycled that way. Obviously these days at the tip they get you to put it aside anyway, but they charge you for it first. So it's usually cheaper just to get it, wait until you've got a trailer full and take it to the scrapyard, even if you don't get enough to cover your petrol even, or you might just get enough money to cover your petrol, but at least you got rid of it. You saved $70 or something taking it to the dump. But that's finally got rid of that machine. That plastic case will have to go in the dump, I think. The circuit boards, I should be able to throw them in the e-waste somewhere at one of the tips. They should take that. I don't think I'll bother saving any of the parts off those boards. If anyone's interested, that's the boards out of it, minus that one I left on the front. I don't think I'll even bother taking that off. There's probably maybe a couple of kilos there of very, very low grade rubbish boards, but at least if someone will recycle them, it's better they get taken somewhere and shredded into whatever they can get out of them than just throwing them on the dump. So at least they'll get recycled to some degree, and hopefully all the lead and stuff out of that gets recycled rather than put in a landfill. And how do we get the heads off one of these? Well, I just snipped all the wires because I don't want to reuse these. And we need a head puller, and I've just noticed this one of the circlips has fallen off it just to make life difficult. So that piece has come loose, so I might have to pinch one out of this machine after all. Is that one we just took out of the Sharp about the right size? Oh, that's going to do it, I think. Well, I've already possibly used a part out of this Sharp video to repair my head pullers. They do have a habit of, if you leave them lying around on the bench, the circlips go missing. I'm pretty sure I've had to replace one on this before. Something bumps it or something, and that's the end of that. There you go. Thank you, Sharp, you've already come in handy. So these just have a couple of threaded little pieces, and this piece in the middle, and we just simply slide it, put it in the two holes in the top of the head, threaded holes it's got, screw it in. They're usually the ones sort of displaced from the ones that had the original screws, and as we screw this plastic bit in, you just center it over the shaft through the motor, and we just keep turning, and of course with that pushing down on that bit and these pulling up, it just pulls it off this brass piece, and that's well and truly seized up. So I don't think I'll bother with any of that. You could get a little piece of brass off there and take the little grub screw out of it and recycle it. Forget what these bits, looks like this bit of aluminium comes off with a lower bearing in it, but since these bearings are seized up, or maybe they've collapsed down there and the two bits are rubbing together, I don't think I'll bother. Yeah, those two bits of ferrite are rubbing, so it might be that this has been disassembled by someone and not put back together properly or something. Either way, that can go in our irony pile, and that's all we had to do. Usually, sometimes you had to heat them up because they just didn't want to come off, but that was pretty rare. The earlier Sharps than this, the 8300 I think it was, or might have been the 7300s, they actually had a brass upper drum on them. So they were quite interesting. That weighed quite a bit. But I think they're the only machines I've seen with a brass one. Maybe some of the real early top loaders and that from other makers had them. The old piano key types, but all the ones I've seen have been aluminium normally besides those Sharps. And see, these have got bits of ferrite with steel attached to them. Some sort, I don't know if they're meant to be weights or what they are. You can unscrew these two head bits, they just come straight off, but then there is little grub screws, so not really worth much for scrap, but that might be handy for a demo use of showing how these sort of scan the heads. Maybe I should keep the whole bit for now, because that shows the tilted path that the tape takes, or the heads are on a tilted path, the tape takes a straight path. And yeah, that was the bit went like that. That helps mount it on an angle. So maybe I'll keep all that for the moment, and we'll do a video of that. But that's the end of that Sharp, so thanks for watching.